Hi guys, welcome to another episode of MrLopezClasses.com. In this episode, we are going to talk about the diagnosis on the spark plugs. We are going to start with the spark plugs, and we are going to check the spark plugs from the beginning, and we are going to try to do troubleshooting with the spark plugs. Danny, what is the main function of the spark plug?
Well, there's a couple functions. Actually, one to produce spark in the combustion chamber, to ignite the fuel, and the other way to dissipate the heat through the spark plugs.
Oh, dissipate heat.
Yeah. I know most people don't know that.
Yeah, it's good news. Dissipate heat. Danny, the spark plugs are different between 2-stroke and 4-stroke engines?
Absolutely. The different spark plugs. They look the same, but the heat and the resistance are different inside the spark.
Okay, it's basically in the construction.
In the construction of the spark plug, correct.
Not necessarily in the electrode.
No,
They look similar.
Yeah, it's just the amount, because each engine may produce a different voltage for the spark plugs.
Oh, okay.
And
correct.
you would need the specific spark plug for that to be ignited.
All right. The construction of the spark plug, the capacity of the spark plug, depend on the coil, no?
Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
Depends on the coil and depends on what kind of heads, because sometimes you have, like that one's long and this one's short.
Exactly.
Well, depends on the head.
What happened? What is the main difference between the long and the short?
Well, it's the depth of the head, how it goes into the head. If you put this long one and the short one, the pistons will actually hit that.
Yeah,
That's why the design.
I hear some years ago, because I am an old school mechanic, that the short ones are heat spark plugs and the longer ones are cold spark plugs. That's true?
Back then, yes.
Yeah.
I would say it was true, yes.
But today, the people never pay attention on if it's cold or hot. It's
Right.
according with the
It's
manufacturer.
according to what the manufacturer. Each engine is tested with a certain spark plug, and that's the spark plug you need to stay with.
Correct. That's the idea.
You don't want to swap from one spark plug just because you think it's going to be better. You have to, because those engines are tested with that specific spark plug.
Danny, what happens if you don't replace the spark plugs according with the intervals recommended?
Well, what happens, a couple of things happens. It depends on if you have a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke. Then the 2-stroke, what happens is, especially if it's a direct injection shoots a spark right directly in the cylinder, and what happens is it ignites the fuel. Sometimes there's a little bit of fuel there, and then you'll get some fuel accumulation, and what it does is it makes carbon deposits. And then what happens is, over a period of time, that metal surface area gets coated with carbon deposits, not allowing the spark. It'll actually bridge the. Remember, the spark wants to go the quickest way to the ground. So you have a deposit bridge is going to go right to the deposit bridge.
The different manufacturer of spark plugs, they say, this spark plug have the same characteristic of the champion with the number and with the motor craft. They say that there are different manufacturers with equal spark plugs, and you can use any of those spark plugs in the same engine. That's true?
No, I do not. I mean, if you're in the Bahamas and you had no choice, then I would use it.
Yeah.
But in this case, I would tell you no, because champions tend to run a little bit hotter than an NGK will. So, and I've seen that in the past, that people try to go cheaper with the NGK because the NGK is cheaper, and they put it in a Yamaha power head, and what happens, it'll end up burning a hole right through the piston.
In other words, follow the recommendation of the manufacturer.
Follow with the service manual and the recommendation, absolutely.
Okay, it's good idea if I have a VA engine, mix it the spark plugs.
No, stay with the same manufacturer.
The
Like
same.
if you're going to use champions, only use champions. Don't put champion, NGK, a.c.r. You can't do
No,
that.
because that you can damage the coil.
Oh, and also remember, always use marine spark plugs, because you can get the same spark plugs in automotive.
Correct. What is the difference between the marine spark plug and the automotive spark plug?
Well, on the marine spark plug, if you notice, this is actually a stainless steel. Okay?
Correct. That's the first one.
And right, and then what happens is the steel, it'll work. The steel will work, but what happens is you're in a saltwater environment. You're gonna get corrosion. The day you go to take that spark plug off, you might round this off, and then you're gonna have to take the heads off.
This is very important, guys. It's on the materials. It's in the quality of the stainless steel.
Absolutely.
No, because it's ignition protected, because the spark plugs are not ignition protected.
No.
Because I hear some years ago somebody say, no, it's because the marine spark plugs are ignition protected. No. The spark plugs are not.
It's the material that they're made in.
Correct. It's not ignition protected because you have the rubber bulb to cover the spark plug.
Right.
That's the protection.
Right. And another material they sometimes use iridium.
Oh, iridium.
On the Optimaxes, they use
correct,
the
it's
iridium.
iridium. This is other important thing. The quality of the electrode, especially the material on the electrode, is a special material, no?
Yes.
It's a titanium, iridium,
Yeah.
vanadium,
Absolutely.
constantan, special material.
Some spark plugs are $30 to $40 a piece.
Yeah,
It
correct.
depends on the engine and what they want. Like on the Optimaxes, they range from $24 to $35 a spark plug because
Yeah.
they want a specific.
In comparison with the automotive spark plugs, $4.
Well, we'll just compare to this one, for example. We'll compare this one. This is just a JCC4. This is an old two-stroke. It's only $8.
$8. Yeah, I know.
So you're going from $35 to $40 to $8. It's a big
Yeah,
difference.
that's big difference. Danny, we are going to talk about the calibration of the gap. Why is too critical the gap in between the electrode and the arc?
Well, just think of this. When you want to try to have electricity pass through, the closer the metal is to each other, the quicker it shoots and it's stronger the electricity is.
Correct, and the arc
And the
is
arc-
more concentrated.
Correct, and it's more concentrated. The further away it is, the arc takes longer. Not only that, it's weaker, and it'll be a different color.
Correct, and the quality of the explosion is less.
It's less, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's not the same having a strong spark combustion in a combustion chamber exploding the fuel compared to one that's really long. And what happens is when it's gapped too far, you're going to build carbon deposits because
Correct.
it's not burning.
That's the other topic about the carbon deposit. Why the carbon deposits are the enemy of the combustion chambers?
Well, the carbon deposits, for one, you get sticky rings. If it's a four-stroke streaky valves, you foul out your spark plugs, and what happens is it just builds over a period of time. And then what happens is if you get sticky rings, it gets the carbon deposit in the ring, then you could even lose compression.
Correct. Guys, you know why carbon deposit can destroy the engine? The carbon deposit on the intake valves avoid that the valve close properly.
Correct, yeah.
And you have
Then
low
you have
compression.
low compression.
Low compression. Carbon is carbon.
Yeah.
Diamonds is carbon.
Yeah, exactly.
This is
Exactly.
carbon. And other important thing is the carbon deposits are the enemy of the combustion chamber because the carbon deposits keep the combustion chamber at high temperature and produce detonation and produce misfiring. Why?
Well, as far as the misfiring is because, for one, if the carbon is there, remember, the electricity is looking the quickest way to ground. So if there's a lot of carbon deposits on the spark plugs, it's going to go to the carbon deposits and it'll actually ground out. And so then what happens is you tend to load up the spark plug even more with fuel because you have it's not blowing, it's not exploding the fuel that's in there. So you get wetter and wetter and wetter, and it just builds up.
Correct. Oh, great explanation.
It'll give you a rich running engine.
Yeah, correct.
Because you're getting too much fuel, you're not burning, you're not consuming that fuel, and you can see that in the smokes and all that.
Danny, what happened with this particular electrode? This is the typical electrode. What about this?
So this one here is for a Yamaha, and what happens is instead of the spark jumping from the electrode to the middle of this, it actually shoots from the side.
On the side.
So what happens is the electricity goes from the middle and it goes to the side to the rims, and that's how it ignites the fuel.
It's more efficient?
This really, they don't even use this much anymore. This pretty much is only for the older models. Everything is typical like from the other one. They don't use this very often.
Danny, you remember in aviation with the Continental engines or like Cummins, they have two spark plugs for safety.
Right.
There are outboards with the two spark plugs?
Yeah, absolutely. Suzuki actually has a two-stroke outboard that had 2 spark plugs per cylinder.
Danny, this is another great example, Suzuki 150V engine, 2 spark plugs per cylinder,
Like we were
and
discussing, yeah.
1 coil per each 2 spark plugs.
Yeah, so you have one coil controlling both cylinders, both
Oh
spark
yeah,
plugs.
1 coil with 2 cables for both spark plugs. Other coil for both. No, it's not efficient.
No, it's not efficient. They thought it was efficient, but it's not. It only lasted like 4 or 5 years. And that was
Oh really? It's not on the market right now.
No, you'll probably never see this again.
Yeah. Okay.
Only here.
All right, and you replace each individual coil easily.
Yeah,
no
let's say you
problem.
have no spark on one cylinder, you can take this coil, throw it over here, move that coil, see if the problem moves.
All right.
See, that's
Okay.
another good troubleshooting. Like for instance, it doesn't matter if it's twin spark plugs or single. In a typical two-stroke, you could take a coil and swap it. If hey, I got no spark on the cylinder, do I want to know is it the CDI
Correct.
or is it going to be the coil? Well, very simple. Without taking the meter, you can actually swap it because it's easy enough. 2 screws
Correct.
and plug,
Yeah,
and swap it and see if the problem moves.
And you solve the
If the
problem.
problem moves, that tells you
Yeah, of
bad
course,
coil.
of
If
course.
it doesn't move, then now we need to troubleshoot the next step.
The next.
Again, process of elimination is really important.
Yeah, that's the secret. Oh, really? And it's with the same concept? One is the backup of the other one?
Not really. The reason they did that only because they got a 10% more fuel efficient burn, because what happened was when they placed the spark plugs, it wasn't burning the fuel efficiently, so they added more spark in there so it would ignite all the fuel in the cylinders.
And each spark received the power from a different coil?
No, actually that one will be the same coil firing both spark plugs at the same time.
But this is...
I know.
This is
just for
you divided,
yeah.
that's...
It didn't last very long, put it that way. The concept was a good idea on paper, but in reality, it wasn't that great.
Yeah.
And actually, we actually have a motor that we can show with a 2-stroke Suzuki had 2 spark plugs.
2 spark plugs. Yeah, but I was thinking in a different coil, but no.
To me, it's just more expensive to change spark plugs. Now you got to change 12 plugs instead of 6.
Yeah, Danny, in order to check the quality of the engines, the mechanics, normally we check the color of the smoke.
Correct.
And we say that if the smoke is a white color, it's because we have a humidity in the combustion chamber.
Correct. Moisture.
Normally, that moisture is coolant.
Correct.
And we have the other is the black smoke, and normally it's a rich mixture.
Correct.
For different reasons.
Correct.
And the blue oil is related with the oil consumption.
Oil consumptions.
And but it's good idea. You can take a decision according with the condition of the spark plug. What happened when the mixture is rich, when the smoke is black? What happened with the spark plug?
Well, this will be dark and carbon though.
Oh, really?
Dark and carbon. So what happens is just like you said,
Like
you
the
know,
spark plug that we have on the screen right now.
The spark plug on the screen. And so what happens is it fouls out the plugs, what we call fouling out plugs. And so
Okay.
what happens now that because this is so wet, again, fuel is a good conductor, so it's going to short the ground, so you're not going to get it to ignite the spark plug. And what happens is then you're just dumping fuel into the combustion chamber.
Okay, we are going to refresh. Black smoke is the spark plug is black.
Right.
It's dark.
It's dark.
Okay.
And it's carbon, more carbon.
It's carbon and it's dry.
It's dry.
It's dry. Okay.
It's dry.
If we have a blue smoke outside, what happened with the spark plug?
Well, it'll look like carbon, but it'll be more oily.
More oily.
And it'll be shiny.
Yeah,
It'll be a
it's
shiny,
shiny. Correct. That's correct.
a shiny. It'll look like carbon when you first glance at it, but if you really look at it, you'll see that it's shiny. It looks oily, and you can smell it too. You can smell the difference.
Correct. Excellent. If we have a white smoke outside, what happened with the?
You would see rust.
Rust.
And also you would see that it'll be very like a rusty look. It might not be completely rusty, but it'll be somewhat rusty.
In some cases, a little amount of humidity over there.
Yeah,
No?
it'll just color it.
Color, correct. Okay, Danny, what about when the mixture is too lean? What happened with the spark plug?
Well, if it's too lean, okay, what you would see that it's very, very clean. It's not gonna. It doesn't. You can tell the difference if, like, let's say you took it was one cylinder that was running lean. You would see this will be really white and cleaner than the other ones.
Okay.
But it all depends on what motor you're working on too, because some motors have oil injection injected into the cylinders separately from the gas.
Yeah, correct.
So you have to be careful when you know what you're working on and see what the service manual says, because if you're working on an engine, for instance, like a G2, that's a 2-stroke. It's direct injection, so it'll throw fuel.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah, and then you have oil injections lines into the crankcase to the journal that feeds to the combustion chamber
Correct.
to ignite at the same time. So if you take the fuel away, it'll give you the oily, it'll give you the blue smoke. That's why you have to know what you're working on. That's the thing. That's the new technology. So what happens? That new technology can mislead you. But that's why you, as a technician, need to look at the service manual and understand the product.
In other words, not all the 2-stroke engines produce blue smoke.
No. Well, so in that particular case, like the G2, for instance, like this engine here, yes, it will produce blue smoke, even though it's a leaned out mixture, only because the oil and gas don't mix until the combustion chamber. So if you take away the gas, then you have only oil. So again, you have to do the process of elimination.
In that case, in this particular engine, the diagnosis on the spark plug
Could
is
be tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky.
But in a traditional 2-stroke, like let's say a carbureted, and it's running lean, because remember, the carbureted engine, you're getting gas and oil mixed together. If it's lean, then this will be very clean.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see anything.
Okay.
But if it was really running rich, then you dump in all that oil and gas, and you will see a lot of carbon buildup.
Good. Danny, we have great examples here of black smoke, oil, excessive temperature, and improperly tools.
Right.
What about this?
So this one here, when you don't use the right socket, okay, you have to use the right socket. This is a spark plug socket. If you use a regular socket, what happens is it puts pressure and it breaks the ceramic.
What happened if the ceramic, this is porcelain, what happened if the ceramic is broken?
Well, if it breaks, sometimes these come through and it can fall into the cylinder.
Yeah.
And then what happens is it becomes
That piece of metal go into the cylinder and
Yeah,
destroy
and
the
destroy
cylinder.
the engine.
All right.
So that's what happens when you use the improper tool.
Yeah, that's the situation, and proper tools. All right, what about this?
So this one here is nice and carboned up. So this one here has probably been, it's probably nothing wrong with the plugs. This probably hasn't been changed in a while.
Yeah.
And that's why this is what it would look like when it's been used too much. It's
Correct.
carboned up.
And what about this?
Now this one here, if you notice, the gap is huge because what happens is it's got a lot of hours on it, and what happens is you can see that there's too much gap. See the difference in the gap between that one and the other one? It's a
Correct.
huge difference.
The excessive gap erode the electrode.
Absolutely.
And finally, the arc is not appropriated, and the combustion is not good.
Good.
All right, this is another example, no?
Yeah.
Of an excessive amount of oil.
Oil, correct.
All right, and
See how it's nice and shiny?
yeah, that's the shiny,
shiny.
the shiny color.
And you see the difference on the one, the other one. This one here, see, is not shiny. It's dull, dark black dull.
Because this is fuel.
And this one here is
this
nice and shiny.
oil.
Yeah, you can see how it's all shiny.
Okay. Danny, I remember some years ago, the majority of the shops, they have the spark plugs cleaner with the sand, you remember?
I used to have one.
Yeah, really.
And I used to have a machine that used to check and make sure the arc was
The
right.
arc, the color of the arc with an mirror, no?
Yeah.
But today it's difficult found that equipment.
Yeah, well, today now they just replace it. The manufacturers don't want you. That was back in the day. That era is pretty much gone.
How you clean today the spark plug?
I don't replace it.
No, you replace.
Now, let's just say for test purposes, let's say I don't want to, when you're testing a motor, you don't want to throw new plugs at it and foul out the new plugs and then damage the new plugs. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take it to a wire brush, spray some ether, clean it out, put it in there only for test purposes. I wouldn't let it stay there for the customer. I would replace it, but for test purposes so you don't damage the new set of plugs, just to know your diagnostics. Like, I'm going to give you an example. So we have a bad injector on one of these engines. So this is all fouled out, and I test it, and we find out it's the injector.
Correct.
If I don't change that plug, I'm going to get the same result that it had with the bad injector.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important that you change the plug or clean the plug. If you clean the plug and you put it in there, then it'll work. If you don't do that, then it'll fail, just like if it was a bad injector. Again, the troubleshooting, you have to do a process of elimination. You got to make sure you have spark and compression and then fuel. Those are the three essentials that you need. So what could affect this, and let's just say we have a bad cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
So if this was a bad cylinder, then you would see gray and metal on this.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's another indication. And another indication, if you see the electrode that's pushed in touching the other part, then that's more likely there might be a bad rod. And what happens is the piston smacked on top
Yeah,
of it.
that's true. That's
top
true.
of that.
Returning to the replacement of the spark plug periodically according with the intervals recommended by the manufacturer, if you exceed those intervals, you can affect the performance of the engine.
Absolutely, especially on the 4-strokes. So the 4-stroke, if you look here on the screen above, you'll get what's called blow-by.
Blow-by.
Even your cars will have that if you don't change your spark plugs. And the areas that are here will be like yellowish,
Yeah,
reddish.
I remember.
That's because the combustion is starting to leak through because it's been here too long. Remember, this gets hot, it expands, it contracts. And with if you don't change the spark plugs, what happens on the 4-stroke, you will actually you'll get burn marks through there, and so you lose compression.
Yeah.
Because if you're getting burn marks through there,
Uh-huh.
that means the combustion chamber is
Oh,
pushing
great.
some of that through there.
Great. Danny, other common problem I remember some years ago with the aluminum heads is, try to remove the spark plugs, be careful, because you can destroy the thread.
Threads, absolutely.
How can you avoid that?
Well, first of all, there's a couple of things the way they do it. The aluminum heads, in most 2-strokes and 4-strokes are aluminum heads.
Yeah, the majority.
You can only torque them to a certain spec. You can't crank
Not
them.
too much.
You can't crack them. Now, if you damage the threads in the heads for the spark plugs, they do make helicoils for that, or you can retap it if you save it. But just think about it. If you're
bad
tapping,
experience with
yeah,
that.
if you tap it, you throw metal into the cylinder.
Correct. Correct.
But-
And you introduce pieces of metal.
So what you would have to do is take the head off. So if you're not, it's better to be careful. And if you, what I normally do, and I tell my guys, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can do it by hand first,
Correct.
or you take a little clear hose and you put it over this
Uh-huh.
and use that.
Ah, that's good. That's good
Okay,
idea.
so that way you don't have, because sometimes the spark plugs are not straight like this. Some are an angle, some are angled out. It all depends on like this one here. If you looked on the back, it's actually angled in the middle.
Yeah.
So what happens is kind of hard to get to. So if you use that hose, a long clear hose, and you can at least get it. Once you get it started, you know you're not going to cross thread. Now, if you put it in there and you think you have it in, and all of a sudden you're tightening, it's just getting harder and harder. Stop, because more than likely you're cross threading.
Okay. Danny, what about the cream silver color?
Yeah, the never sees. Yes,
Never sees,
never sees. You can use never sees.
That cream.
With up on the screen.
It's good idea.
Never sees is good. What it does is
Especially in iron heads, no?
yes, and iron heads, right?
Yeah.
Only because the metal, again, it'll bind up, and so this cops. What happens is it does is if it seizes up, and you have the never sees will allow it to free up. Because what happens is, and like for instance, like 350 Chevy blocks, gas cylinders, those are cast iron heads.
Cast iron. I use it in those engines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is a great idea. Okay. Thank you, Danny, with this great explanation about spark plugs. Danny, in this particular engine, we are going to check the relationship in between the coil, the spark plug, and how the current travels.
Correct.
All right. That's the coil
So this is the coil. So this is going to be probably about 40,000 volts from the computer.
in the output.
Right, in the output, because
the
it's got
output.
a transformer inside.
It's a step-up transformer.
Right.
At the input of the transformer, you receive 12 volts.
12 volts,
And the output is
about 40,000 volts.
40,000.
Right.
And a step-up transformer.
It'll make your hair stand up.
Yeah, I know. I know. What happens if suddenly you touch with your finger that cable, the
Well,
high tension cable?
If you touch it, it'll shock you. It's gonna scare you more than hurt you. It's just not a comfortable feeling.
Yeah, all
But
right.
it's not a bad. It's not gonna kill you.
It's not critical.
Right. It's not critical.
All right. This is the coil. That's the output of the coil, and this is the input of the spark plug, and it's connected with that cable.
Right. If you take this off,
Correct.
if you look on the inside,
Correct. You have the metal.
you
on
have the
there.
metal that goes on top of the spark plug.
Those cables are called also high tension cables.
High tension cables.
Yeah, because it's in the high tension side. Of course, this rubber is a high quality rubber.
Right.
What happens if you have a crack on that piece of rubber?
So if you let's just say you have a crack, it is close to a ground. Again, ground's looking for the quickest way to ground. It can actually arc and go right to the
And
block.
you can see the arc.
And
no?
you can see it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Especially if it's dark,
Yeah,
you can see the
see
arc.
it. Right.
All right. And this computer receives the power from
the computer. So this
From the
gets
computer?
this is when it tells it when to fire.
Yeah.
So the computer controls all the information with all the sensors and knows what the RPMs and how many times it needs to fire. Remember, this is like the E-Tech injector that controls the polarity of the injectors.
Correct.
So by doing that, it knows it when to fire and how much. And this one here is a different system because there's two different type of coils, but which we'll discuss.
I remember the other one that you showed before was
stratified.
Correct.
Which, if you look at the picture,
Correct.
it's up there, and this is the induction system.
Induction.
So the difference, so everybody understands what the stratified. The stratified basically is how they did it before the induction system came. What it'd be every time the injector shot fuel, the spark had to fire simultaneously, so you have a good combustion burn. But since they didn't have a system, so what they did is the coil was constantly sparking, and what happens is it would burn the tips off because it was on and off.
For that reason, the evolution path
into the induction system. So
Induction.
now what the induction system does is the spark plug stays on until it fires and then shuts off.
and protects
The spark plug. So you get longer life. You get about an extra 100 hours out of it.
In other words, the induction system is a new system.
It's a newer system.
All right.
So and this is what the new system coil looks like.
Okay, perfect. And those coils are interchangeable. You can change.
Yes, you can change those. If this one's not sparking, you want to know if the problem's here or if the problem's in the computer, you can do a quick swap.
All right.
Yes,
Okay.
you can do that
All
with
right.
this.
Okay. There are a spark tester like this, multiple, to check V6, V8 engines at the same time, like the tester that you have on the screen on top. The spark plug tester is a special adapter that you install in series in any wire spark plug. What is the procedure? The procedure is simple. Those are the high tension cables or spark plug cables. You remove one of the spark plug cables and you insert in series the tester. You insert in series the tester. And now you open the ignition switch and you crank the engine and you verify the spark over there. Danny, I know that there are different type of tools to check the quality of the spark. This is your favorite.
This is my favorite one, and the reason is because I could do 8 cylinders, I could do 4 cylinders, you can do 2 cylinders. It's all pretty much universal, and I like that you have your common ground for the arc to jump from the spark plug wire.
And you can see the quality of the arc between this point and this point. You can adjust this one open or close, no?
Correct.
And according with the color of the arc and the intensity, you know if the coil is working properly and the spark plug.
Like for instance, let's just say you do a compression check and you notice that one spark plug is darker than the others.
Yeah.
And you have good compression, and then you do spark. There's no spark on that cylinder.
Correct.
That's how you can verify.
Oh, I love.